Today, normally when I come to conferences like this, I preach, and I sit down. But for some reason, I haven't really felt like I should be preaching to you all. I'm just going to be mostly talking from my heart and some insights that I've gathered. And today's session is, you know how you do this macro thing to the micro, where you start wide and you get narrow and pointed. And this next session is actually more pointed to my own life as well, and I think it's something that every person in ministry has to grapple with at some time or another. So I'm going to start off looking at Elijah. 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 15. You know the story of Elijah. He's one of my heroes. In fact, when my wife and I had a chance to go to the Holy Land, the most memorable, emotional time for me was sitting on top of Mount Carmel, imagining Elijah standing one man against whatever it was, 650 prophets or 800 or however, we'll just round it up to 1,000 to sound big. And one guy against a bunch of people. And I have no idea how he had the courage to do that. But listen to his language. He says, I am a servant of the living Lord, all-powerful, and I swear in his name that I will meet with Ahab today. Obadiah left and told Ahab where to find Elijah. Ahab went to meet Elijah, and when he saw him, Ahab shouted, "There you are, you troublemaker." And Elijah looks him in the eye and says, "You're the troublemaker, not me." I don't even know what translation I'm using, but it's like New Living or something. "You and your family have disobeyed the Lord's commands by worshiping Baal. Call together everyone from Israel, have them meet me on Mount Carmel. Be sure to bring along the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." He knew who these prophets belonged to. It was known. Ahab got everyone together, went to meet Elijah on Mount Carmel. Elijah stood in front of them and said, "How much longer will you try to have things both ways? If the Lord is God, worship him, but if Baal is God, worship him." And the people did not say a word. This guy's got a lot of guts. Elijah the Tishbite, the inhabitant of Gilead, served the Lord in very dark times. I can't imagine him being a prophet of God, surrounded by an entire nation who had turned their back on his God. And they were supposed to be God's people, the chosen people. Yet there was a darkness over the entire nation now. And right from the top down, he was a middleman. He was an outcast. He was a guy that lived outside of the normal society because he couldn't function within the normal society. There's few characters in the Bible who demonstrate as much courage in the face of opposition as Elijah did. He knew his God was the one true God. He had great confidence in God, and he had no doubts about how this day was going to end. There's a few extremely dramatic moments in the Bible, like parting of the Red Sea, or the resurrection of Jesus, defeat of Jericho, the calming of the storm, the raising of Lazarus from the dead. They make us stop and consider the mighty hand of God. But the fire that Elijah called down on that mountain would have been a terrifying moment, particularly for the prophets of Baal who realized they're worshiping the wrong God and they were not long for this world. But then things dramatically change, and this is what really makes my head spin. Chapter 19, verse 1, Ahab tells his wife Jezebel what Elijah had done, that he killed all of her prophets, and she is incensed. She could probably barely even speak. She's so angry. So she sends a message to Elijah, "You killed my prophets. Now I'm going to kill you. I pray that the gods will punish me even more severely if I don't do it by this time tomorrow." In other words, you have 24 hours, get your house in order. You're going to be dead. And it says, Elijah says, no, 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 no. You, witchy woman, you will be dead. No, he doesn't. He says he was afraid. He was terrified. He ran to the town of Beersheba in Judah, and he left his servant there. I'm thinking if Elijah had have called down fire, if calling fire down from heaven, killing 850 prophets, he should have been a superhero. He should have been an invincible. He should have been able to say anything he wanted and it would have been done, because everyone was terrified of Elijah's God. Yet he turns and runs. It's as though Elijah believed that even if God could send fire down to earth to burn up the sacrifice, the water, and the rocks, that God was powerless against an evil queen. I've been around pastors all my life. I'm a people watcher, and I watch people's ministry. I watch how they handle themselves in public and in private, and I can tell you that no person is strong all the time. That each one of us have our own insecurities and weaknesses. And I wonder if Elijah grew up with an overbearing mother. I wonder if he was afraid of women. Why would he be so afraid of a queen, not even the king, but the queen Jezebel, when he had just had 850, we'll just say 1,000 prophets taken out, and now someone threatens him, and he runs like a child. He's okay when he's fighting against the prophets, and when he stands up and face to face with the king, but somehow he couldn't handle an angry queen. Whatever it was, he was not able to be strong. He became like a frightened child. He ran. I'm alone. I'm all alone. I'm all by myself. No one else worships God. I wish I was dead. I don't understand the transformation from Mr. In-your-face king to running like a child. But I have met pastors strong in the pulpit who cower before their wife or children at home. I have met men of God who are mighty prayer warriors, but who are naive and get taken advantage of by unscrupulous people. I know church planters who can plant dozens of churches but have weaknesses for pretty women. They don't know how to even talk when a pretty woman walks in the door. They have to impress somehow. They become undone and they feel temptation overwhelming. I know worship leaders who begin to enjoy performing in front of people and love the attention they receive, become arrogant and proud. Somehow they crave attention. There's some weakness that a lot of leaders have, some insecurity that they have. I heard of one worship leader. He had probably 1,000 people out front. He had a choir behind him. He had an orchestra out front. He was leading the song, and all of a sudden he stops. And everything stops, and he says, "Oh, I just wanted to see if you were all watching me." I would have fired him on the spot. So Elijah walks another whole day into the desert. Finally, he came to a large bush. He sat down in its shade, and he begged the Lord, "I've had enough. Just let me die. I'm no better off than my ancestors." And God, he just simply says, "Get up and eat." Just get up and eat. Verse 5. Verse 7, the Lord's angel woke him again and says, "Get up and eat, or else you'll be too tired to travel." So Elijah sat up and ate and drank, and the food and water made him strong enough to walk another 40 more days. God's just taking him to a safe place. At last he reached the Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. And so there he met with Elijah, the all-powerful God. We know the story, the mighty wind, the fire, the earthquakes, and then the small voice. And when I am feeling at my weakest and most insecure, I don't need someone yelling at me. I don't need them overpowering me. I need a small voice saying, "It's going to be okay. It'll be all right." Calm down. I got this. Insecurities can cause our minds to twist the truth into a lie. So was it true that Elijah was the only one left to serve God? No. There were 7,000 others. Was it true that Jezebel was going to kill him in 24 hours? No. In fact, she was going to end up dying a very gruesome death herself. Somehow Elijah couldn't see it. His interpretation of reality was skewed, I think, because of his insecurities, because we all have them. So the question is, how can a man of God so quickly go from being bold and powerful to being weak and afraid? What does it take? I remember the first time I had a chat with a millionaire. I grew up poor. We wore used clothes, secondhand clothes. I worked my way through university. I didn't get grants or scholarships, and I had my degree, whatever. But pastors are not known for their great wealth, and so I was leading a conference somewhere, and a millionaire called and said, "I'd like to meet with you." I'm going, "Oh no!" So I found my best shirt, I ironed it to look sharp, got dressed up, had shiny shoes, which I don't normally have necessarily. Shiny shoes, well, they were shiny. And my shirt was pressed, and I combed my hair. I had to look my best because this was a millionaire. And I found that the evening that I spent with him was completely unremarkable and uneventful and unhelpful and a waste of my time. Because I'm thinking, oh, he's got money, I wonder if he wants to invest in our ministry or make a donation, or, I'm thinking, what can I get from this guy? I got to behave. And I was sucking up to him, trying to, be nice, and thinking what's going to happen with this, and nothing happened at all. And I thought, what a waste. I remember I went to Vienna Opera House when I was a student. I had a chance to visit my relatives who were missionaries in Eastern Europe, and I was with my grandfather. We went to the Opera House. We walked through the entrance on the way to our seats, and we looked into this one room. If you were at the Opera House the other day, you saw the big chandelier gold room, and they had a room like that. And all these black tuxedo, long dress, sparkly gowns, diamonds, and pearl people were in this room with champagne flutes. And they're all... And my grandpa, we didn't even have suits or ties. We tried to throw a sweater on or something to look decent. My grandfather, who was from Oklahoma, Kansas, farm boy, looked in there and says, "Yep, they got to put their pants on one leg at a time too." And we walked on by. I've never forgot. That's the only advice I ever remember my grandfather giving me. It stuck with me. It's been 30 years, and it reminded me that we're all just people. I once asked my brother, how do you, he has a ministry to Fortune 500 people, does discipleship for very wealthy internationals, and I said, how do you handle them? They're so powerful and influential around the world. And he says, you know what? They may be businessmen and run multinational corporations, but they got troubles in their marriage. They've got kids on drugs. They got anxieties and insecurities. You have no idea. He says, you've got to be a strong man of God. That's what they need, a man of God. They don't need business advice or investing advice. They need someone that can speak to their soul. And said, I can do that. So, Elijah was an amazing prophet. In fact, though Elisha, his successor, reportedly did twice as much miracles as Elijah, it wasn't Elisha who God called to meet with Jesus on the mountain. It was Elijah, considered the ultimate representative of the prophets, and all others were compared to Elijah. What does it take for you to crumble with your insecurity? What is your insecurity? Is it, if you got diagnosed by cancer, would that throw all of your trust in God out? Would you crumble into the fetal position and lose your confidence? What about having a son or a daughter that's in trouble? Would you be consumed every day by worry and anxiety? Marriage troubles, would you become jealous angry, distracted. I know when I fight with my wife, I can't hardly stand in the pulpit to preach on Sunday. Because I'm always thinking about that fight we had. I'm not thinking about presenting the Word of God. Addictions, self-medication, whatever, sometimes we cover over our fears and anxieties with medication. I know a guy who never could go into public until after he had a drink of whiskey, because that calmed him down. That could make him confident in a social setting, but he would never go out without his whiskey first. What are yours? What are your insecurities that make you doubt God? Rich people? Church bullies? I hate confrontation, but I learned a long time ago that if I don't stand up to the church bully, go toe-to-toe, face-to-face, they won't respect me. So I force myself to do that, and I have a confrontation early in my ministry at the new church with the bullies, because they need to know it's not my first rodeo, and I'm not going to be pushed over by anybody. Doesn't matter if you have money or not. In fact, I marginalize the rich just so they know I'm not going to come sucking up to them looking for their money. It's like, no, God's enough. We don't need you. We're not depending on you. This is kind of my, you understand, my wife says, Tom, you're too harsh. You know, I said, I talk big, but I'm actually very kind and gentle in person. Not always. But I'm giving you the condensed version of things. Do you understand that? And I do take a few freedoms. The leading researchers have found that as much as 75% of our own mental programming is negative and working against us all the time. You're not good enough. You're not educated enough. You don't have enough experience. You don't have the stuff that other people. You have to fight negative programming in our heads all the time. But let me look briefly at one other guy who's probably the best example of insecurities in the Bible, was King Saul. It said he was a choice and handsome young man in 1 Samuel chapter 9. Choice and handsome. No one among the Israelis was as handsome as he was. He was like the poster boy for handsomeness. And it says he was a head taller than any other people. He stood out. He was like a god walking among men. Why can't you be more like Saul? He's so handsome. And the women would go, ooh, there's Saul. And this is the one they picked to be the king. But immediately his insecurities and his doubt kick in. Listen to what he says. Am I not a descendant of Benjamin, the least of the tribes? Isn't my family the least important of all the families of the tribes? Why have you even talked to me? Immediately the tapes kick into gear. You're nothing. You come from the smallest tribe. Your family's the small. His dad probably says, you know, make sure you're nice to everyone else because we're the least of the least. And you might need a job from somebody else someday. So he's playing back the tapes. And then when they pick him as king, it says that some of the troublemakers in 1 Samuel 10 says, how can we serve this man? How can he deliver us? And they despised him and did not bring him a gift. And Saul remained silent. I'm going, wait a minute. This just reinforced the insecurities. People don't trust him. They don't think he's good enough. It says they despised him. They wouldn't even bring a gift. And he says, Saul kept silent. Like, I will never forget that you didn't bring me a gift. I won't forget. It'll come back one day. I'm sure Saul said. So God knew Saul's heart and his fears, yet he was still chosen. He was given a chance to trust God, but his insecurities got the better of him. So when he sins, when he blows it, when he lies and disobeys God, Samuel confronts him. And the first line in chapter 15, 17, Samuel says, is it not true that though you were small in your own eyes, yep, come from a small town, my family was poor, we didn't ever amount to much, not educated, whatever it is, small in your own eyes, you became the head of the tribes of Israel, and the Lord anointed you king over Israel. It's kind of like God saying, okay, I'm going to pick you as a pastor, as a leader, and I'm going to put you in a place of prominence. And I know you don't think a lot of yourself, but I think a lot of you. I've got a task for you to be a person of influence, to do a lot of good in my kingdom. I don't really care what you think about you. I want you to understand what I think about you. And I think our insecurity, if I was a perfect person, I wouldn't need God. But because of my insecurities, I have to call out to God quite frequently. My weaknesses create a dependency on God. Why didn't you obey the Lord? You grabbed the spoils and you did evil in the Lord's sight. This was Saul's worst nightmare. He's pretended to be strong. He had to be strong. He had to satisfy all of his soldiers. He let them take some of the goods. He didn't follow God's rules because he was trying to make everyone like him. He wanted to be the favorite king. And so he let the people get away with stuff that he should never. He didn't prove to be a leader. He let his insecurities get the best of him. And most pastors don't want to admit they have weaknesses or fears or insecurities because we need to appear strong and confident and self-assured. So Saul lies to God's prophet. I did obey the Lord. I went on the mission which the Lord sent me, and I brought the king back, and I destroyed all the Amalekites. But then what insecure people do is they like to blame others. The people took the spoils, the sheep, the cattle, and the best of what was to be completely destroyed. He didn't forget the command. But they got it to sacrifice to the Lord, like he's justifying the sin. And finally the truth comes out, 1 Samuel 15:24, I've sinned. He just admits it. He comes out. He can't lie anymore. He's looking at Samuel's incredulous face. I was like shaking his head like, yeah, keep going. I'll give you some more rope to hang yourself. Keep going. Until finally he says, okay, I sinned. I broke the Lord's command and your word because I was afraid of the people, and I listened to them. What are we not willing to do because we're afraid? Because of our insecurities? What is it that we are kept from doing, from being a leader in our own churches because we are afraid or insecure for whatever the negative tapes are running in our heads? Please forgive me, he says. Return with me so I may worship the Lord. He's trying to make some concession, and Samuel says to Saul, I won't return to you because you have rejected the message of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel. This was enough to send him over the edge. Now this is proof that he's not good enough. Proof that he never should have been king. It's now been taken away from him. And so he becomes desperate, which insecure people often do. They become desperate and they can turn into being, well, we'll get into it in a minute, but here he turns into being a bully. He reaches out and he grabs Samuel and he rips his clothes. And Samuel probably he's stunned that Saul would become so desperate, but there's nothing left for Saul to say or do. He tries to take matter into his own hands, grabs the prophet, rips his cloak, and Samuel basically says, look, just like you torn my cloak, God has torn away the kingdom from out of your hands. And he says, and this is tough to hear, he's given it to your neighbor who's better than you. It hits again at his identity, who he is as a person. Have you ever had a bully in your church come up to you and talk about, you're not good enough, and who do you think you are, and how dare you think you know what's best for this church? You've only been here 2 years, and I've been here for 20 years, and you're not going to change things, and the threats, you're not good enough, you don't know enough, you don't have enough experience, and you stand there and you realize God called me here. This is my Mount Carmel. This is my moment to stand up against the evil, the threats that are challenging me. Do I have the confidence in God or not? And then the jealousy sets in because David comes into the forefront, and David becomes the well-known king, and David becomes the focus of all the songs of the women. David killed his 10,000s, and Saul killed his thousands. And it says Saul remembers this. It bugs him. And in verse 9 of chapter 18, it says, Saul kept his eye on David. The jealousy starts creeping in. Insecurity continues to get the better of him. His insecurities tore away the kingdom out of his hands. He didn't realize that his insecurities were more powerful in his life than God. So persistent insecurities can lead to excessive anxiety and paranoia. Do you ever wonder what the deacons are talking about when you're not there? Do you ever wonder what the rich people or the influential people are saying behind your backs? Why didn't you get invited to that party at their house? Why wasn't your list on the name for the barbecue? What are they doing? That's the insecurities speaking, the lack of confidence. And sometimes we try to overcome our insecurities by compensating. We become cocky or arrogant or loud and aggressive because we're feeling very weak inside. Sometimes insecure people get excessively competitive. They're always comparing with other people. We had 500 people in church. Oh, I couldn't believe it. We could barely even fit enough people, and we had to bring extra chairs and had people sitting in our fellowship hall looking through a small doorway because we're so many people this week. You might come across as being defensive or combatant or overly critical of other people. I have a younger brother who became very insecure, and I remember visiting him one time. He was I hadn't seen him in a long time, but I can tell you within the first 5 minutes of being in the car with him, he had criticized every leader in the denomination. Like, I can't believe what he's doing, leading this, he should never, and this guy, like, I'm going, what have you ever done? You feel qualified to criticize all the leadership of this denomination? And you've only half pastored a church at a half-time place in small town Texas? Like, really? But I can, red flags go up all the time, especially when people come and they judge people quickly, they blame people for the problems, they're very jealous, they're petty, and none of these behaviors are spirit-filled behaviors. They're not love, joy, peace, and patience, and kindness, and gentleness, and self-control. They're jealous and angry and critical. All these things that are destructive. I remember thinking, watching my dad in ministry over the years. All of us, his kids, were pastors at one time. And hard to watch a guy that speaks at the United Nations, that's invited to the White House to speak to presidents, that gets to be on the platform with all the biggest personalities over the years, that went to speak to all the heads of all the African nations. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I wouldn't mind some of that. I wouldn't mind a little bit of that. I've served well. I'm educated. I've written. I'm important too. Why can't I have a little taste of some of that? Important stuff, going to the White House and all that. And basically, I remember complaining to God one time, like, when will I get my chance to shine? And God says, you're not ready. You can't handle it if I put you in a place like that. You would screw up. I said, okay, God, make me ready. Make me ready. He said, be faithful where you are and let me take care of your future. So I just tried to be faithful. And then I got an email from someone who was a chaplain at the United Nations, and he says, I'm taking a team of people to southern Sudan and leading the nation in a day of prayer and fasting a month before they vote to become a nation, to secede from Sudan. I would like you to come and be a part of that team. I'm going, like, what? Where are you taking me? To Juba? And I mean, I was terrified. Of some of these places I've had to go, I didn't know they existed. And then to think that I'm going to some small little village with a Muslim place that I could get killed by some witch doctor, and like, well, Vienna would be nice. Why are we going to Juba? And I got to stay in a cargo container hotel. It was really nice. It was a double wide, and it wasn't bad at all. But the night before I'm supposed to meet the president of South Sudan, I'm on my knees. I'm going, God, don't let me be a fool. What do I say to a president of a country? What do I do? I don't know protocol. I don't know what I'm supposed to say or do. And at that moment he said to me, now you're ready. Now you're dependent on me. You didn't come in your confidence and your pride, promoting yourself. You came in humility, dependence. I will give you the words to say. And that spoke to me because it said, when I'm faithful in the small things, not always looking for the big opportunities, not looking for the platform, not looking for recognition, not looking for my name to be up in lights. God can raise you up in His time, because then you're ready to represent Him well. Insecure leaders defend when they should explore. They take things personally. They blame the higher-ups for tough decisions. They don't trust others because they don't trust themselves. Insecure people can't say no. They threaten and intimidate and coerce. They shut down input from others because feedback is frightening. They micromanage. I have been an associate pastor in 4 different churches, and can't stand the leaders that do your job for you because you're not doing it right. Insecure leaders don't delegate, they yell, they backstab, they create teams of yes men. They like to illustrate their competence and successes very frequently. They brag and they name drop. So I had lunch with so-and-so last week, and like, oh, yeah, and I had this person at my place, and I was like, name after name after name, going, why are you telling me these things? Sometimes they crave positions of authority and respect. They need to be seen as being important. They need to hang around important people. They share blame and they take credit. They name drop. But it's not the real you. That's not who you are. That's what happens when you cover up for insecurities. That's what you do to try to save face. That's what you do to try and seem like you're confident when you're really not. It's not you, it's the you want to be that you're covering over for because you don't have security inside. And I know I'm not doing justice to this topic because this takes sometimes years to deal with. I'm dealing with I know many of my insecurities, and so I have people around me to help me have proper perspective. Most of our insecurities are based on irrational thoughts and emotional responses instead of the truth of the situation. Taking a rational approach to what's happening can help us to overcome the insecurities, because the insecurities are lying to us and distorting the reality of what's going on. I go into my board meeting, and I came back into the pastorate 2.5, 3 years ago, and I wanted to be, the wonderful pastor, all my experience, international travels, and I've done so much. And then I get into a little church that really doesn't care very much about all my wonderfulness and how amazing I am. It doesn't impress them. They're blue-collar, hard-working people that none of them, they're not really that educated, and it doesn't impress that I have Dr. Blackaby on my nameplate. I do that so I can feel good about myself, I'm sure. I got to at least remember I actually am educated. But when I preach, I'm not preaching to the intellectual people. I'm talking to the people that want to know, how do I change my life today? Like, how do you help me get my kid back on track? How do you help my marriage come back on track? How do I know what to do today with my relationship with God? So So I've had to, when I come into my board meetings, I can get so insecure because they're not respecting me like I think they should. They're challenging me. I go, what? How stupid can you be? Like, don't you realize the kind of pastor you have? No. And so God is again humbling me to say, Tom, be faithful to this church. Help this church be who I want them to be. Help this church recognize their role in the community. You know, love that person and that person and that person. Can you not see the fears in their eyes? I have a lot of senior citizens in my church, and they have tremendous fear. They're losing their hearing, so they don't know half of what's going on. They're losing their sight. They're losing power over their own resources. The children are wanting money from them. They're losing the ability to climb stairs. They're losing the ability to go to the bathroom properly. All of the fears that they're dealing with, and I'm preaching to a large group of people living in constant fear. Tom, how will you help them trust in the Lord? And I'm saying, we could be changing the world, and they're going, I can't go to the bathroom very well. Like, okay, Tom, I want you to be a shepherd to these sheep. This is your role. The root cause of our insecurities, I don't know. What is it for you? A demanding, critical parent, a perfectionist parent, that you were never good enough. They were always redoing everything that you did. They were always critical. Maybe it's like me. Your dad was never around. You grew up without a father in the home, and so you're always trying to get some recognition, some affirmation that you're doing good. You need someone to pat you on the back because your dad never did. Always trying to get someone to say, good job, Tom. And if you crave that impacts how you minister, how you serve in the church. If you have to have affirmation from your people, you ain't going to get it very often. And if you do get it a lot, there's something wrong, I think. You're not speaking truth all the time if you're wanting always to have the pat on the back and great sermon. I like those sermons sometimes when my people walk out and don't say anything to me, because that means they're really pondering, they're really thinking and processing the truth that they just heard, and God has really convicted them, and they can't talk because they can't look you in the eye. It's not that you berating them, but you're preaching the truth, not for a positive response. You're trying to transform people's lives and hearts, and that's hard sometimes. So if your insecurities dictate how you preach to get affirmation, you cheat your people of the truth. Sometimes we actually do have to believe others' opinions of us. You're a good dad. No, I'm not. You're a good husband. No, I'm not. You're a good pastor. No, I'm not. Stop saying, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. Maybe you are. Maybe you can stop lying to yourself. You see, I realize that insecurities are very devious. You can't be successful. You're never successful when you're insecure. Success doesn't cure insecurities. Some of the big pastors in Christendom are some of the most insecure pastors. They seem to have all the big ministries and the influence, yet when you get them in private, they let down their guard, and you can see where they're really struggling. Affirmation doesn't conquer insecurities, because even though you get the pats on the back, you don't believe it anyway. You say, I don't deserve it. That's not true. You discount even affirmation, or your accomplishments don't conquer your insecurities because you're never good enough. You never achieved enough. You see the lies that insecurities force us into. But when I look at what happened in the scriptures, so far we've talked about Moses, didn't end very well. David didn't end very well. Elijah didn't end very well. Yet they are some of the most influential people. Even Paul, we're going to talk about tonight, I don't think he ended very well either. He didn't end in a strong place. In prison, killed, didn't live out his ministry building a huge church kind of thing. But somehow these are the most prominent characters in our Bible, yet they were filled with insecurities and issues. We'll talk about Paul's later. So we all have our own version of insecurities. What I'm insecure about, you may not have any problem at all about. Maybe you grew up in a different way, but everyone has some kind of, and I think that when you, the point at which you actually admit what your insecurities are is when you can start becoming a healthy person as a pastor, a healthy leader, because you begin to admit, I'm frail, I have flaws, I need help. And so I tell my board, I said, I know I have a tendency, I'm really high on making good decisions, and I never second guess my decisions. I make a decision, I go for it, and make the best of it. But I don't say, oh, I never should have done that, oh, I should have done something. I go, nah, I don't do that. But what I'm not great at is being merciful and kind and gentle. I'm not high on the mercy scale. I'm really kind of, I really try. But you know, some people just get over it, you know, move on. Why are you moping? You know, so I have to surround myself with merciful people. People that have compassion. People that stop me from confronting when we really need to have coffee with someone instead of confront them. We need to say, how can we pray for you? How can we help you? What's going on? I had this lady one time march up to me. We didn't have the Sunday school literature in time. We were ordering it from America to Canada. It was stuck at the border. Sunday school, the new quarter was coming up, didn't have the teaching material. She says, where's my teaching material? I just walked into the church building, took my jacket off. Where's my material? I said, we've checked on it. We can't find it. It's been sent 2 weeks ago. We're waiting on it at the border. And she says, if you were in the secular world, you would have been fired a long time ago. And she turned around and walked away. I felt like she just threw up all over me. Good morning to you too, you know. Well, I found out that morning, she was a charge nurse in a nursing home. That morning, when she was in the shower getting ready for church, her left hand wouldn't work. And she couldn't turn off the hot water in the shower. And it scalded her. And she's terrified. It had never happened to her before. She's terrified she's getting MS or some deteriorating muscular issue because she couldn't grip the water knob to turn the hot water off. And she's terrified. And she's coming to me and she's frustrated. It's got nothing to do with the literature. It's got everything to do with what just happened in the shower this morning. And I, because I'm a pastor and I can't fight back, I'm a safe target, and I get to get all of the anger and all of the frustration and all of the fear poured out on me. Well, I decided to love Mary. She was a Brit. And so I decided to have tea with her as often as I could. And went to, she was a nurse at the kids camp that summer, so I went every afternoon to her trailer that she had brought in, and we had tea and biscuits. And the next year, when I had put in my resignation to move to another ministry, she came to me and said, Tom, you're the best pastor we've ever had. And I said, okay, should have been fired a long time ago, with best pastor we've ever had, you know, kind of. But I realized that also that in my church, I'm dealing with everyone else's insecurities and their fears. And for me to step back and realize that the presenting issue often isn't the real issue. That I'm the lightning rod for everyone else's fears and anger and frustrations and anger at God. Why is my son coming out as gay? Or why is my kid strung out on drugs? Or why didn't my daughter come home last night? And I prayed and nothing seemed to change. And why, you know, I get the anger and the frustration. But it's because of people's insecurities. So I have to take a step back. I have to trust that God knew who He was calling into ministry. I have to trust that if He called me, He will guide me to accomplish what He has set before me to do. I was in a meeting with, I'm going to name drop, you know, because I'm insecure, but I was in a meeting with Ann Graham Lotz. We were doing a conference together for leadership, and we were in the green room between sessions, and we were saying, and this is about probably 10 years ago, and said, and how it's been very difficult. I noticed that the Graham family has been in the news a lot. There's been a lot of criticism against your brother and your family. And she says, I know it's been very difficult for our family. All the news, media, the criticism that's been coming towards our family. And she says, but you know what the worst thing is about it? She said, they don't know half the stuff that's going on. She said, we're really screwed up. And they don't even know about it. I said, thank you for being honest. Part of dealing with your insecurities too is to laugh about yourself. To be able to not take yourself so seriously and ask the question, what does it really matter? I mean, what does it matter if the deacons or board follow my advice or not on this issue? I'm a little church in the back end of Langley in a hidden community that nobody takes any care about anyway. Like, really, where am I? Yeah, of course I'm in a church that if we believe God, we can touch a world. I know that. But honestly, the news cameras are not in my church. The reporters aren't there recording all my words. Nobody really cares. But God knows where I am, and He put me there to be faithful. And I have to ask, what do I need to learn to become the man of God I need to be through this church? Because every church can impact who you are and how you serve. What do I need to learn? God, why this church? Why this time? Why this place? What is it you want me to help this church to do and to become, and what do you want me to do and become because I'm here? So I'm still on another learning curve. It's actually a new culture for me where I'm serving. I have to learn this culture and the neighborhood and the way of thinking, and I have to mold and shape my messages to impact these people and challenge them to move beyond their narrow provincial thinking to have a worldwide perspective. And it's happening slowly. So Psalm 25 is my life verse, Psalm 25, 4 and 5, and it starts off with verse 1, I will lift up my soul to you, Lord. I trust in you, my God. Do not let me be ashamed. Do not let my enemies triumph over me. Indeed, no one who waits on you will be ashamed, but those who offend for no reason will be put to shame. And here's the verses I like. Cause me to understand your ways, Lord. Teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth. And teach me, for you are the God who delivers me. My hope is in you all day long. I needed to be guided into His path and into His truth, and not to believe the lies of insecure feelings. And everyone knows Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and don't depend on your own understanding. And I take that to mean sometimes our understanding is inaccurate. Our perceptions are not true. In all our ways acknowledge Him. He will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own opinion, but fear the Lord and turn from evil. This will bring healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. Do you know the best way to find out what your insecurities are? Is to ask your spouse. They know. And to sit down and say, okay, just tell me just one. Just give me one. I can only handle one at a time. I don't want to know all of them at once. Just give me one at a time. Maybe next week we'll go for number 2. But tell me my insecurities. And they'll say, okay, well, are you sure you want to know? Yeah, I need to deal with these. I need to name them. And I need to address them in a healthy way. Or else I will never achieve my potential. I will always be held back. So you look at Saul. He crashed and burned. He was overwhelmed by his insecurities. Others, Paul has, I'll talk about his this evening, but too many pastors crash and burn because of insecurities. Too many leaders can never overcome the insecurities to achieve the potential that God had put in them to achieve. To be honest with yourself, to deal with your fears, to ask God to show you reality and truth will lead you down His pathways and will bring the results that He always intended to have in and through your life. Let me close in prayer. Father God, drawing deep from the well of confident assurance is not confident assurance in us and our abilities, it's in you and in your abilities. We have to empty our bucket of ourself and draw deep from the well of you. Our confidence is in you, and our assurance is in you and the work your Holy Spirit has done in us. You chose us. You've given us an assignment. You've given us tasks to do. You've ordained many things for us to accomplish, and you said you will do it through us. And Father, we can do all things. No, we can do all things through Christ, who strengthens us. And I pray that we would be so dependent on you, and we would push the lies of Satan and lies of the insecurities that scream out at us that we're not good enough, that we need more, that we need something else besides you. I pray, Father, you would silence those cries from our past, from those events that have caused us to feel less than you have created us to be. And I pray that we would put our confidence fully in you, that our people would not suffer because of our weaknesses, but that through our weaknesses you would be strong. Just like Paul says that he would glory in his weaknesses because through them you are strong. And you can lead your people through us if we release our lives and our fears and insecurities into your hands. This is my prayer in Christ's name. Amen.